When you hear church bells, I'm assuming you, and, well, most other people, normally think of something like this. No, I meant this. Not gonna lie, boring as hell, right? But what if they sounded like this? Much more interesting, right? While it's difficult to find a recording that does these bells justice, the pulsing rhythm is simply mesmerizing. The clashing of the bell's notes that are close in proximity, combined with their perceived overtones, also creates a dense, yet also open tone quality that is, well, anything but boring. And minimalist composer Arvo Pärt, who grew up listening to these church bells in the town of Rakvere in northern Estonia, also loved these bells. In fact, these very bells were the ones that he cited as the inspiration for a style of composition called Tintinnabulation.
Wait, Tintin, what?
Yes, you heard me correctly. Tintinnabulation, while the word itself simply means the ringing of bells.
Wow, it's almost like as if it's relating to the bells of Estonia.
Look at you using your big brain. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Didn't think I could figure that one out. Anyways, while the translation of the word itself is simple and straightforward, the technique itself is also not as complicated as you may think. Actually, one of the beautifully unique things about the Tintinnabuli style of composition that Arvo Pärt constructs is not only how simple it is, but also how beautiful it can be. In some cases, Arvo Pärt is also guilty of showing his admitted influences to chant music of the Middle Ages. It's the realization of combining the older influences of chant music with the newer influences of minimalism that create the beautiful fusion of the Tintinnabuli style. And let me tell you right now, if you've never heard Arvo Pärt's music before, you're in for a real treat. But before we get into Arvo Pärt's Tintinnabuli style, we should talk about, well, who Arvo Pärt is. Pärt is a minimalist composer from Estonia who has been majorly influenced by both sacred texts, his religious faith, and Gregorian chant in his compositional practices. While Pärt studied music at the Tallinn Music School and the Tallinn Conservatory with Eno Eller, he has spent the rest of his career afterwards as a freelance composer. Much of his early years were a time of experimentation. At the time, with Estonia being part of the Soviet Union, Pärt used both compositional techniques that were not exactly endorsed by the Soviet Composers Union, and he also used many religious texts during a time when the Soviet Union was trying to deliberately suppress religious expression of any kind.
Damn, Arvo!
Yeah, honestly. After this early experimentation, Pärt began to shift towards a rejection of contemporary compositional techniques, looking to Gregorian chant, the music of the Notre Dame school, Renaissance polyphony, and his profound faith after he joined the Orthodox Church. He's openly admitted himself that, quote, religion influences everything, not just music, but everything. And it shows, with most of his works from this point onward being religious and mostly text-based. And that, my friends, brings us to the granddaddy of compositional styles that Arvo Pärt invented, and the style that he is the most associated with. I, of course, am talking about the Tintinnabuli style, which uses a process called Tintinnabulation. The Tintinnabuli style itself is based on the overtone series of harmonically tuned bells. Unlike the overtone series that is normally used that emphasizes the octave, fifth, then major third relationship, the overtone series of harmonic bells emphasizes a lesser spread of overtone pitches being heard. Instead, you hear a hum tone an octave below the original pitch. The immediate minor third, perfect fifth, and octave immediately above the original pitch. This is partly why the Estonian bells we heard earlier sound both closed in texture and also somehow open and vast. Arvo Pärt uses this chord triad relationship that naturally exists in the overtone series of harmonically tuned bells in the process of applying tintinnabulation to his music, using the tonic chord of the piece based on the established key. To best describe how this is done, let's turn to the sheet music, where I can properly tell you and show you what it means to apply tintinnabulation from a compositional standpoint. For the sake of example, let's say we are in the nice, simple key of C major. There we go. And let's write a nice, simple melody using 8 half notes, starting and ending on our tonic of C. There, nice and simple. We will refer to this as the melodic line, labeled M in the given diagram. From this point, we can add multiple different layers of tintinnabulation, being either inferior, which is below the melodic line, or superior, which would be above the melodic line. All of these notes and these tintinnabulation layers are only going to use the 3 notes that make up the tonic chord of the written key for this piece. In this case, since our key is in C major, we are only going to use the 3 notes that make a C major chord. In this case being C, E, and G. Let's start our first tintinnabulation line 1 level inferior or below the melodic line. We will refer to this line as the first position inferior, labeled TI1 in the given diagram. In this first line, we are going to add the first note in our triad that is immediately below the given melodic note. So the first one below C is going to be G, because the tintinnabulation note cannot be the same as a melodic note in this case, followed by C, C, E, E, C, C, and G. The result is the following. Next, let's add our second tintinnabulation line 2 levels inferior or below the melodic line. We will refer to this as the second position inferior, labeled TI2 in the given diagram. In this second line, we're going to add the second note in our triad that is immediately below the given melodic note. So the second one below our first written C in the melodic line is E, followed by G, G, C, C, G, G, and E. The result, with two inferior levels of tintinnabulation with the melodic line, is the following. It's very likely that you're starting to pick up on the pattern here. From there, you can keep going, in theory, but for the sake of example, I will fill in the third inferior level, labeled TI3 in the given diagram. Here is what that looks and sounds like. When adding superior levels of tintinnabulation above the melodic line, it's the exact same process, with the only difference being that you're adding notes for the tonic triad above the melodic line and not below. For our example, I added one level of tintinnabulation, one level superior to the melodic line, labeled TS1 in the given diagram. Here's what all of these layers of tintinnabulation with the melodic line look and sound like. Interestingly, if you play a similar part using our melodic line and multiple levels of inferior tintinnabulation with a C drone using tubular bells, you can start to hear the resemblance that this has to the Estonian bells from before. Give it a listen and you might see what I mean. You can really start to hear the resemblance. There's also a noticeable pulse that is being used here, but we'll bring that up again a little later. Speaking of which, while I must admit that my previous example does not exactly do Arvo Pärt's Tintinnabuli style justice, the best way to show how he uses tintinnabulation in practice is to look at examples of how he uses it in his own music. We're first going to listen to and look at Für Alina, which he wrote for solo piano in 1976. This is his earliest example of using tintinnabulation in his compositional practice, using only one line of tintinnabulation in addition to one melodic line. For the majority of the piece, there is a level 1 inferior tintinnabulation, with there being a couple of notes where the tintinnabulation note and the melodic note switch lines. This piece is also a great example of how Arvo Pärt is also influenced by the pulsing of the Estonian bells in his writing. He also writes a third part that adds a B natural drone, helping to establish the key of B minor. It's lastly worth noting how the melodic line and tintinnabulation line are both in the upper registers of the piano, creating a pure yet also haunting sound. The melodic line is also meant to be played 8 VA, 1 octave up, spacing out the melodic line and tintinnabulation line that creates the haunting atmosphere. Let's take a listen to Arvo Pärt's Für Alina for solo piano. I want to leave you today with a piece by Arvo Pärt that better exemplifies how he uses multiple levels of tintinnabulation in the same piece. His piece Magnificat, which he wrote in 1989, is a 5-part choral piece that is set to the Latin text of the Magnificat canticle. For the sake of time, I will only show the first 3 minutes of the piece, but it's one of the best examples of a full realization of Pärt's Tintinnabuli style combined with his religious and Gregorian chant influences.